APA Mechanics of Style. APA style is a down style, meaning that words are lowercase unless there's a specific guideline to capitalize them. For example, capitalize the first word of a sentence unless the sentence begins with a person's name that starts with a lowercase letter. Also, capitalize the first word after a colon, for example, in a title or a heading. So in general, you capitalize the first word of a sentence. However, if the name, proper name, or statistical term begins with a lowercase letter, keep that term lowercase even at the beginning of a sentence. Or you could just reword the sentence to avoid beginning with a lowercase letter. In general, you want to capitalize your proper nouns, such as names of universities, departments, and specific courses, but don't capitalize unofficial or generic names. In general, don't capitalize job titles or positions, but do capitalize them if they appear before a person's name. Don't capitalize names of diseases, disorders, therapies, treatments, theories, concepts, principles, models, hypotheses, or statistical procedures, but do capitalize personal names that appear within these terms. Capitalize the names of racial and ethnic groups, such as African American, Black, Native American, Hispanic, and so on. Capitalize the official titles of tests and measures and their subscales, but don't capitalize names like test, scale, subscale, inventory, or questionnaire unless they're a formal part of a title. Also, don't capitalize numeral or letter when referring to a numeral or letter itself, such as the number 7 or the letter A. Don't capitalize nouns that precede a variable, such as trial N or item X. And also don't capitalize names of conditions or groups in experiment, such as the experimental and control conditions, but you do capitalize condition A and condition B. You do want to capitalize most nouns such as table 1 or figure 2, day 3 or grade 12, but don't capitalize nouns when the number comes before the noun, like the first table or the third day. Title case is a kind of capitalization in which the most important words, most words, are capitalized. You'll use title case for titles of works in the text of a paper, but not in the reference list. Journal, magazines, newspaper titles, the title of your paper, and all headings in the text of your paper. Capitalize the second part of a hyphenated word in major words, and capitalize the word is and be because they are verbs. In title case, most words include the first word of a title or heading in any subtitle, the first word after a colon or dash in a heading, and all major words, any other words of 4 letters or more, and lowercase minor words such as conjunctions of 3 words or fewer, prepositions of 3 words or fewer, and articles. Throughout this presentation, we're going to show references in single spacing just because of space on the slide, but know that all references should be double spaced in the reference list of an actual paper. Sentence case is a special kind of capitalization in which most words are lowercase, except for the first word. Use sentence case for titles of works and reference list entries, including articles, books, and web pages. To implement sentence case, lowercase most words in the title, capitalize only the first word of the title, the first word of a subtitle, and any proper noun. Be aware of how many abbreviations you have in your paper, and overuse of abbreviations can make writing hard to understand. Underuse of abbreviations also has its problems. It can make writing less clear because readers may not remember what an abbreviation used infrequently means. So don't overuse abbreviations. Use standard abbreviations rather than making up your own. Use an abbreviation at least 3 times in a paper. Otherwise, go ahead and write it out. Use abbreviations consistently. Don't switch between an abbreviation and the spelled out version. On the first use, go ahead and write out the full term and follow it with the abbreviation in parentheses. If the term appears in the narrative, place the abbreviation in parentheses right after it. If the term appears in the parentheses, place the abbreviation in brackets to avoid nesting parentheses. Abbreviations listed as words in the dictionary do not need to be defined in the text, such as something like IQ. Avoid defining an abbreviation in a heading and still write out the full term if appearing for the first time in the heading, then write out the term and put the abbreviation in parentheses the next time it appears in the text. If statistical test is mentioned at least 3 times in the paper, you can provide the full term and its abbreviation parentheses at first mention, and then use the abbreviation for subsequent mentions, for example, using a NOVA. For Latin abbreviations such as IE or EG, do not italicize them or define them. Include the punctuation as shown in this table and use them only in parentheses. In narrative text, use the English meaning, like say, for example, or say, that is. So commonly use IG for that is or EG for example, but put those in parentheses. You can use Latin abbreviations also in the reference page. For example, the Latin abbreviation et al. Means and others, and you can use that in your in-text citations. Do not use periods with abbreviations except IN for inches. Abbreviate a unit of measure when it's with a numerical value, and do not add S to measurements. So you could use M for meters, MS for milliseconds, and IN period for inches, and CM for centimeters. The reason that IN uses a period for inches is just to avoid confusion with regular IN. Do not repeat units when expressing ranges or multiple amounts, and write out a measurement unit when it appears without a numerical value. Use the following time abbreviations when they appear without a number. You can use HR for hours, MIN for minutes, S for seconds, and MS for milliseconds. However, do not abbreviate these larger units of time even with numbers, days, weeks, months, and years. Numbers that appear in an abstract are treated the same as numbers that appear in text. In general, use numbers to express any numbers 10 and above, and use words to express numbers below 10. So 1 through 9, use words. Type out ONE for 1. Anything above 10, use the actual number. However, there are several exceptions to these general rules, so consider numbers on a case-by-case basis. Use numbers, even for numbers below 10, to express mathematical values such as fractions, decimals, percentages, or ratios. And any measurements, times, dates, ages, scores, and points, exact sums of money, or units of measurement. Capitalize the noun that comes before a number, denoting a place in a series. However, do not capitalize the abbreviations for pages, for paragraphs, even when they are followed by a number. For example, page 10, pages 1 through 6. When a number comes before a noun, the general guidelines for number use apply. Use numbers in all cases for numbers that follow most nouns and denote a place in the series, but use words for numbers that precede the noun. So for experiment 1, capitalize the E. For grade 8, capitalize the G. But if you say the 8th grade, keep those in lowercase. Use words, even for numbers 10 and above, to express numbers that begin a sentence. So if you say 48% of the sample, go ahead and spell out 48. Common fractions, such as 2/3, go ahead and express those in words. Numbers in universally accepted expressions, such as the 12 apostles, go ahead and type out 12. Use a symbol for a statistic that appears with a mathematical operator, such as a plus sign, minus sign, equals, and so on, and insert a space on each side of the operator. Do not insert a space after a minus sign that is indicating a negative value. Use the percentage symbol and the currency symbol when they are accompanied by a number, and use the word percentage or the name of the currency, such as dollars, when a number is not given. Use an uppercase italicized N to refer to a number of members in the total sampler population. Use a lowercase italicized n to refer to a number of members in a subsample or in a specific study condition. Use one space after a period or other punctuation at the end of a sentence. Change the number of spaces after end punctuation if using different guidelines for your course or assignment. Use periods with Latin abbreviations. Do not use periods in capital letter abbreviations or in acronyms, and do not use periods in scientific abbreviations except for IN for inches. Do not include periods and abbreviations for state, province, or territory names. It's optional to abbreviate United States to US or United Kingdom to UK. Use periods after the initials of people's names in reference entries, and insert a space after each period. Use periods after abbreviations in reference list entries. Use periods to separate reference elements, that is, between the author, the date, the title, and the source. However, do not use a period after a DOI or URL. Use comma between items in a list of 3 or more items, including before the final item. Use semicolons between items in a list if there are already commas between 1 or more of the items. Use a comma before the year in a parenthetical in-text citation. Use commas on both sides of the year in an in-text citation that has narrative text in the same parentheses. Use semicolons to separate multiple in-text citations in the same parentheses. Use commas to set off a non-restrictive or non-essential clause, a clause that, if removed, would not change the meaning of a sentence. Do not use commas to set off a restrictive or essential clause, a clause that limits or defines the material it modifies. Use commas to separate 2 independent clauses joined by a conjunction. Use a semicolon to separate independent clauses not joined by a conjunction. Do not use a comma between 2 parts of a compound predicate. A compound predicate says 2 or more things about the same subject without repeating the subject. Use commas between groups of 3 digits in most numbers 1,000 or more. However, do not use commas within any number in the following cases: page numbers, temperatures, degrees of freedom, binary digits, serial numbers, or acoustic frequencies. Use a colon after a complete sentence to emphasize the text after the colon. Do not use a colon after a dependent introductory clause, a clause that is not a complete sentence. Use a colon to compare numbers and ratios and proportions. Do not include spaces before or after the colon. Use colons to separate 2-part titles and 2-part headings. Add a space after the colon and capitalize the first word after the colon. Use a colon between the titles and subtitle of a work, both in the text and in the reference list entry. Use a colon between a heading with 2 parts. Use a slash in a hyphenated compound between 2 parts of a compounded adjective when one of the elements is already hyphenated. Use either a slash or a short dash to make a simple comparison. Use a slash to separate a numerator from a denominator. Use a slash to separate units of measurement accompanied by a numerical slash. However, if no numerical value appears in the unit of measurement, spell out the word per, cost per square meter. Use a slash between the years in an in-text citation for a republished work. These years will match the years that appear in the reference. Don't use a slash when writing out a phrase that would be clearer. And don't use a space before or after a slash. Some compound words have established spellings. These are permanent compounds. A permanent compound is spelled with either a hyphen, a space, or no hyphen or space between the words. Those are called closed compounds. Consult the dictionary to determine whether a word is a permanent compound. If the compound word appears in the dictionary, follow the spelling shown there when writing the word as a noun. Use a hyphen in a permanent compound terms that are spelled with a hyphen in the dictionary. Check the dictionary to determine whether a word is spelled with a hyphen and when writing as a noun. Use hyphens. In temporary compound terms, use a hyphen as a compound modifier. However, if a compound follows the term, don't use a hyphen. Do not hyphen adverbs that end in ly, comparative or superlative adjectives, chemical terms, foreign phrases, nouns with a letter or number as the second element, or fractions used as nouns. Words with prefixes and suffixes are usually written without a hyphen, as shown in the table. Retrievable, antisocial, covariant, and so on. Do use a hyphen after prefixes in the following cases: to avoid double nouns such as aa, ii, or oo, as in anti-intellectual or co-occur; to prevent misunderstanding, repair, appear again, or repair as in fix; to separate prefixes from base words that are capitalized, numerical, abbreviated, or made up of more than one word. In all self-compounds, self-esteem, or self-report. When two or more compound modifiers apply to the same base word, do not repeat the base word. Write the base word only after the last modifier. Write a hyphen after each modifier. Leave a space after the hyphen when the base word is omitted. Write any punctuation directly after the hyphen. Long and short memory, 2, 3, and 10-minute trials. When working with direct quotations, use parentheses to enclose page numbers of direct quotes of less than 40 words, and put ending punctuation outside the closed parentheses. Use brackets to insert material into a quote that's not part of the original, for example, to explain or clarify the quote. With in-text citations, use parentheses to set off the full parenthetical in-text citation and to set off dates in narrative in-text citations. Use parentheses to set off elements in a sentence. Put the punctuation for end of the sentence outside the closing parentheses if only for the part of the sentence that's in parentheses. If the whole sentence is in parentheses, put the punctuation for the end of the sentence inside the closing parentheses. Use brackets to enclose material that's already in parentheses. Don't use back-to-back parentheses or brackets. Instead, use semicolons to separate the multiple citations or phrases within the same parentheses. Use parentheses when reporting statistics to enclose degrees of freedom. Set off statistics that do not already contain parentheses within a sentence. Use brackets when reporting statistics to enclose confidence intervals. However, use commas to set off statistics within a sentence that already contain parenthetical material, such as degrees of freedom within a test. Use parentheses to introduce abbreviations in narrative text. Use parentheses to enclose letters that identify items in a lettered list. Place commas and periods inside an ending quotation mark. Place other punctuation, such as colons, semicolons, question marks, outside the ending quote mark unless it's part of the quoted material. Use double quotation marks around direct quotations of fewer than 40 words. If the material you are quoting already contains material in quotation marks, use single quotation marks to enclose the quoted material. Do not use quotation marks for block quotations, 40 words or more. Place the quote without quotation marks in a new paragraph and indent the whole paragraph a ½ inch and double space it. Place the citation for the quote after the closing period of the quote and use double quotation marks to enclose the quoted material within the quote. Use quotation marks around the title of the periodical article or book chapter in the text or in a copyrighted attribution. Do not use quotation marks around the title of a periodical or book chapter in a reference list. But use quotation marks around the first time a word or phrase is used as an ironic comment, an inverted expression, or slang. Use quotation marks to refer to a letter, word, phrase, or sentence as a linguistic example or as itself, but don't use quotation marks to refer to a number as itself. Use quotation marks to present stimuli in the text. However, quotation marks are not intended around a stimuli presented in a table or a figure. Use quotation marks to reproduce an item from a test or to present verbatim instructions to participants in the text. Use italics to highlight a key term or phrase. Italicize the key term or phrase the first time it is used. In subsequent uses, do not italicize the term or phrase. Use italics sparingly and usually with terms that you define. If emphasizing a word or words in a direct quote, use italics and immediately after the italicized words, insert emphasis added within square brackets as follows: emphasis added in brackets. Use italics the first time you use a word, phrase, or abbreviation in another language, if readers are likely to be unfamiliar with it. Do not italicize common foreign words that appear in the dictionary for the language in which you are writing. In English, these are words or phrases appearing as main entries in the dictionary. Use italics for letters used as statistical symbols or algebraic variables. Do not italicize Greek letters. Use italics for the anchors of a scale. Italicize the names of periodicals and their volume numbers. Do not italicize punctuation next to an italicized word or phrase, unless that punctuation mark is part of the word or phrase, or punctuation between elements of a referenced list entry, for example, the period after a book title, the comma after a journal name. Do not italicize the titles of periodic articles. Italicize the titles of books, reports, web pages, and other works that stand alone. But do not italicize the titles of works that are part of larger works. When words that would normally be italicized appear within text that's already italicized, set those words in standard non-italic type, referred to as reverse italicized. Items in a list should be parallel, similar in form, length, and complexity. A simple list is a series of items in a sentence. Use commas to separate 3 or more items, including the last item. Use semicolons to separate 3 or more items when at least one item already contains commas. A lettered list is a series of items identified by lowercase letters in a parentheses. Use a lettered list to help clarify and emphasize items. A numbered list is a series of items identified by numbers. Use a numbered list to show order. Use a numbered list function of your word processing program to make a numbered list. Use Arabic numbers followed by a period and capitalize the first word of each item. Make sure each item is a complete sentence and ends with a period or other punctuation mark. A bulleted list is a series of items identified by a bullet. It shows items of equal importance. You can create a bulleted list using Microsoft Word, and bulleted lists should have punctuation after each item. Or you could use no punctuation at all. Just be consistent. Use any standard symbol, such as a small circle. You can learn more about APA Style from the APA Style website, apastyle.apa.org.